Today the Ukrainians finished liberating the Kharkiv region. The Russians still control the area to the east of the Oskil River, but that is around 5% of the Kharkiv region, which is virtually an empty ground that has no big settlements and supply centers. This means that in 5 days, the Ukrainians have undone months of Russian efforts. In fact, in 5 days the Ukrainians liberated more than the Russians managed to capture since April. On top of that, the Russians left behind 20 working tanks, 20 tanks that can be repaired, 50 armored fighting vehicles, 10 artillery systems and more than 100 units of other machinery, which of course will be used against the Russians. This is a huge blow to the morale of Russian soldiers, especially to those who are under the heaviest pressure, to those who are fighting in the south. In fact, today there were new reports of Russians backing down. I cannot tell right now whether it happened as a result of a tactical retreat or abandonment of positions, but the latest news definitely did not inspire them to fight harder. A few days ago it was reported that the Ukrainians breached the Russians' defense near Blahodativka. Yesterday it was reported that the fights are taking place 15 kilometers away from Kherson city, so in my assessment, the Russians lost Blahodan, and are trying to defend Kisilivka. Some Russian sources indicated that the fights are taking place in front of Shkailov. This means that the Ukrainians continue expanding their bridgehead on the eastern bank of the Inhulets River. I have also seen some reports suggesting that the process of evacuation has been started in Velika Oleksandrivka. In my estimation, it is because of a tangible threat of an attack from the north. Finally, when it comes to Arkhangelsk, the situation here remains ambiguous, and if previously the control over it was split 50-50, then now after Alhain, Vysokopilia and Novovoznesensk fell, the situation for the Russians has worsened. Overall, the Russians here are on a brink of a collapse, and they know it because they are trying to reinforce the front as much as possible, even though because of destroyed bridges it is very hard to do so, especially given how tightly Ukrainian artillery controls the passages. I think all of you have seen the videos where a few minutes after a Russian convoy enters the passage, it gets caught under artillery fire. So, Russians' troops in the Kherson region are in a very dire situation, and the extent is hard to underestimate because recently the Russian troops on the eastern bank of the Dnipro River received an order to shoot everyone that tries to cross it. It was supposedly addressed to the civilians, but I do not think that the civilians are considering swimming across the river as much as the Russian troops on the zero line. Now let me go back and tell you exactly what happened in the Kharkiv region. When it comes to the northern line, yesterday the Ukrainians stopped on the line Dvorikna, Veliki Berlik, Vovchansk. Yesterday I assumed too quickly that the Ukrainians established control over Vovchansk. It turned out that even though they entered it, the Russians were still there because they reached an agreement with the Ukrainians to let them evacuate. But, in any case, it does not change the situation in any way because this still meant that the towns on the line will capitulate as well, and very soon they did, and by the evening there were already photos even from Varvarivka, which indicates that the Ukrainians indeed reached the administrative border. Moreover, the Russians also started leaving their positions even to the north of Kharkiv, and today the Ukrainians entered such important Russian strongholds as Kozacha Lopan, Tokarivka, Hoptivka and Lipsy. When it comes to the Ukrainian attack launched from Sloviansk, it was quite successful, and today the Ukrainians already raised their flag in Yermivka. Some sources indicate that not all forces managed to retreat and some got stuck and encircled. I did not find credible confirmations. If you are against the invasion of Ukraine and want to support the work that I am doing, consider making a purchase in the online store UA Supporter. Here you can find a lot of products with Ukrainian symbols, to not only show your support for this channel, but also for Ukraine.